Alright YouTube, continuing on. We're on our bread box build, and I have some beautiful red oak in stock in the house. Unlike most of you, I did not go out and buy lumber for this project. I already had it in stock. So I've picked a couple of boards that I think are going to work well, and this is one of the reasons I wanted a template. Hopefully, I don't know if the camera's going to see this or not, but I've taken the backside and I've drawn a line down. I looked at what I had for boards that were in stock, and I said I'm going to make this out of two boards. I'm going to put them together. So I've got a 5.5 inch wide, and I've got one that's going to be 7.5 inches wide. And that's what we're going to start with, and I've marked my measurements out on the back of this also so that I know what I'm looking for. So that's our first step, is to start cutting boards for what we're going to need. So I'm going to take a tape measure out. My first long side needs to be 16 inches long. So I'm going to come in, find 16 inches, make a mark, and then I'm going to bring out a square just because I tend to be a little crooked sometimes. I'm going to find that mark, and make a line. And then I'm going to double check my measurement. Measure twice, cut once. I'm going to make sure that I'm on that 16. For those of you who may get confused easily, put an X on the side of the line that you're going to cut on. That way your measurement is not off. So I'm going to zoom in real close, and we're going to cut off our first piece. So I've made my mark. I put my X in so I know I'm cutting on this side of the line. I'm going to get my machine plugged in because I haven't done that yet. Safety first always. So alright, we have power. Here goes cut number one. I'm going to unlock my slider too just in case I need it. I'm making sure that I am flat against the fence. I've checked to make sure that the blade is squared to the fence. We're going to line this up where I think it ought to be. Come down and check. And here we go. Board number one. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on board number two. And I've got to have two sides, so I've got to have two boards. I've made a mark. As you can see, I've got quite a bit of board hanging over this time, so bring this over, just set it on the edge of my table. I'm going to double check that measurement. That measurement looks like I am right on the money. I'm going to cut on that side. See if you guys are still seeing everything. I believe you are. Here we go. Find where we're supposed to be. Come down, check the line. Right on the money. Alright, here we go. So there's our first two cuts. And that zero clearance insert is giving me a beautiful cut. Next up on my template is the long board and a different piece of lumber. So I'm going to put this off to the side for a minute. I don't know if I'm going to need it again or not. I'm going to pull out my large board. For those who are wondering, I'm using 3/4 inch stock today. And I'm going to see how tall I need to be on that. So according to this, I need 12 inches, well, 12.5. So where's my tape measure? Right there. We're going to come in, we're going to get 12.5 inches. Right there. Double check the measurement. I am at 12.5. And I'm going to compare against my template. That line ought to come over just to the top of my curve. I'm cutting this piece. So that's what I want, was just to come up to the top of this curve. We're right on the money. So, I'm cutting on this side of the line, so I've got to move just a little bit. That's too much. Right there. Make sure I'm flat against my fence, and here we go. If you're off by a 16th or something, that's okay. 32nd, even an 1/8, you can adjust for that. Which is why I'm also marking my second board with the first one, just in case I'm off. Sometimes it's more important to be consistent than it is to be accurate, so long as you're consistent in the same manner. Making sure I'm cutting on the right side of my line. I'm still squared to my fence. Here we go. Alright, that's our boards that we're going to be putting together. And I will do a demonstration on how we're putting those together here before too long. So now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do for the bottom and the top, and I'll be right back. Alright everyone, so I've just been figuring in some measurements, looking at my blueprints. The next thing I'm cutting is my top plate, which runs along the top of my bread box. I am 22 inches long and 6.5 inches wide. So I'm going with my wider board here. It's my 7.5 inch board. And we are going to make a mark for 22 inches long. As you can see, this is going to be a pretty good sized bread box. I wanted it to be able to fit a giant loaf of bread. 22 inches. And then we're going to measure again. Measure twice, cut once, and I'm cutting on this side of my line. I tend to do things in a certain pattern or way, so I always try to cut on the left side of the line. It just makes life easier. Double check that we're there. Right there. I'm square against my fence. And this time, I'm going to zoom in real close to the blades, or I'm going to try. So you get a look at the blade cutting, and maybe I get some stock video out of it later for another video. Here we go. I'm going to start by pulling out, and then come back through it. That's just my method. There's our top. And I'm going to mark that. Is there an edge on here I don't like? Yeah, I don't like that edge. That will get cut off. Top. Alright. I'll zoom back out just so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Next up, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do for the bottom. So let's look at our plans. It looks like I'm 13 inches wide, 12 inches to the inside from where the sides come down. So 13 inches wide. Well, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do for that. Obviously, I don't have a 13-inch board here, so I'm going to have to pair something. Just because you go out and you buy an 8-inch board does not mean you're getting 8 inches. For example, this one is 7 1/4. That's an 8-inch board. My other one, which is a 6-inch board, is 5 1/2. So now we've got to do some math in our heads and figure out what lumber is going to make the best fit to accomplish what we want to do. In this case, I've got 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think I'll do one big cut, one small cut, or one big board, one small board. That makes sense to me. And I'm also looking at my grain pattern as I'm cutting this, and I actually kind of like the grain on this end, so maybe I think I'm going to do the unusual step of measuring from this side, because I think I want that grain pattern in the bottom. Every time my wife opens it, she'll get to see that. So what did I say we were cutting to? Let's double check our measurements. 13 inches. I like using graph paper, by the way, because I can free-handedly draft something to scale. For example, in this I did every block equals 1/2 inch, so I can count, and 1 and 2 and 3, so on, and I can get my measurement all the way across. Just in case you're like me and you don't write it down for yourself. But it allows you to free-handedly draft something and still be to scale. So that comes in very useful. So I'm going to double check my measurement and make sure that it's right. So that's not what we're cutting here though. What we're cutting here is our length across. So I'm going to be 13 inches wide, which is my 2 boards, and I know I've listed this as the trim board at the bottom. So I've got that listed at 22 inches. That's exactly what I cut for the top, so we're going to cut this to 22 inches. I hope that makes sense for everybody. 22 inches. You also, when you're measuring, by the way, you don't want to have your tape measure like this. You want to be somewhat straight. A lot of people will come right along an edge just to avoid that. That's a good tip. If your measurement is crooked, your cut is not going to be accurate. So you guys are going to get to see quite a bit of wood joining. And this time I'm cutting on this side. The beauty to this zero clearance insert is I can kind of see where my blade's going to come through and line it up. I like that. Right on the money. Let's take another measurement and make sure we're 22 inches. We're 22 inches. Here we go. Hold your piece down. Make sure your fingers are clear. See that? I'm just a hair off. I'm going to smidgen that over. I'm going to have a routed trim edge around this anyway, so I don't mind that. And I think that side is going to be facing up. Yeah, I think so. So this is bottom. And let's see what I want for grain on my little board. Sometimes it's useful to pull that out and say, do I want that like that? I actually kind of like that. Sometimes it's helpful to alternate your grain pattern too, have one going this way, one going this way. You get a stronger seal with your wood that way. In this case, I'm going to use this side. I like the grain pattern on this side. So we're going to get 22 inches measured. Which, if I did that correctly, should match this board perfectly. And it does, right on the money. So let's make a mark. And I'm going to be cutting on this side of my line. Which means I'm going to line my line up to this side of my cut down here. Right there. Here we go. So this gives me, we'll write it on this one, bottom. So there's my two bottom boards, my top boards, both boards cut from my sides. We will have to figure out how many slats we're going to need for our roll top. But the first thing I'm going to do is get all those boards glued together. That way they're ready for it. And the other reason that I wanted to have a template cut for this, because like I said, it's kind of unusual to cut a template for the side, aside from having to make this again, board number one comes right down through here. I'm going to put some biscuits in here, and I wanted to know where is my track going to be, and where are other things all going to intersect, so that I don't have a biscuit in the middle of some place that I'm going to be cutting through. I hope that makes sense to everybody. That's another reason why I did a template and even drew out the inside stuff that's not being used on this template. Sometimes templates are useful, and MDF is a great product for that. Alright, we'll see you when we come back to do the biscuit joining. And I'll show you my way of doing that, because I don't use a biscuit joiner. Thanks everyone.